In the New York City public service system, the government is run by two unique but equally vital groups: the elected and appointed officials who design initiatives, and the employees tasked with implementing them. These are their stories. Dun dun! Well, welcome back to Civil Conversations after a very long break, everybody. So we have not had an episode in over a year, I'm embarrassed to say, but also kind of shocked at how quickly time flies. So I apologize for that. But there's been a lot happening in city politics as of late within the last week that really sort of like enraged me. And motivated me to get this going again. So I appreciate those who have sort of dealt with our long pause, but happy to bring this back. There's a lot going on in New York City. And I think we need to have some conversations and discussions to get people motivated to be more vocal and active and thinking about and advocating for some real change in New York City government. And if you're catching this and like, what are you talking about, Liz? I'm talking about the recent indictment of Mayor Adams and a long series of resignations that have happened with sort of like these rumors and the raids and sort of, I guess, people anticipating the side effects and the implications. So it's been a lot happening and just really disheartening to see how things are falling apart. And really, I think the big thing for me is just trying to keep in mind the impacts it's going to have on all the people who work in city government. Can't imagine the sort of like insecurity or lack of clarity or certainty of how that's going to affect people. And also just as a resident, it's really sad because it distracts us from things that we know should be happening and work that needs to happen. It's just a major distraction from impactful work that should be prioritized over a lot of the sort of drama that's happening. So I just want to acknowledge that a lot has happened in the last year. And we had conversations and civil conversations about a myriad of topics. And sadly, they're still sort of there today. So we talked about gaps in city services and issues with hiring. I think we've had some improvements, but the processes to get people into roles continues to be slow. So we still have like this quiet, I think, less sort of in your face issue with city agencies running a little slower, again, possibly because there's distractions with other things coming to the forefront. Our migrant crisis is still ongoing, and it's been kind of quiet on that front as well. But the city did sign a $1 billion contract to continue work with the hotels that are housing migrants, and that's something that we'll see what sort of comes from that and what sort of things we do to sort of revisit this as a topic for the city, but that's still ongoing. And safety, quality of life. We had a conversation with a police officer, really great conversation. If you haven't listened to it, definitely do check it out. It's just a really good perspective and lens and sort of experience to hear about, learn about. But quality of life and safety is a major concern. I actually just saw it pop up on my phone. Someone got slashed on the subway. So definitely all things that are still very in our face today. So we're bringing back the Around the Water Cooler chat where I bring in a coworker where I used to talk about this stuff around the water cooler and in the kitchen and across desks. And I'm so happy to have you back. I'm so happy to have you back. One of my inspirations to sort of start this, because we have these really profound conversations about city government. I think a lot of people, there's a lot of passion, a lot of insight, maybe a bad perception. And I get where it comes from certain experiences that people see and have, this like perceptions, and lenses of like what a city worker is, jaded, sitting in the basement with their stapler. But we do have a lot of people who are like really talented, really passionate, really committed. And you're one of those colleagues. So I'm so happy to bring this back up and to have this conversation with you, to sort of revive civil conversations with you first. I just want to give you kudos. So just a fun fact, our State of the City Address episode from 2023 is actually the most listened to episode on Civil Conversations. Woo! So I just wanted to say that. Yeah. So I'm really happy to have you.
I'll give you credit for that.
No, but it's a really good conversation and really inspired by our ongoing conversations. Like we text and we talk all the time when these things come up. And so I just really appreciate that you're back, and I'm really excited to have, to delve into this a little bit deeper with you. So I imagine that there's lots of sort of chatter around the water cooler, the virtual water coolers. It could be in Teams meetings and Teams chats, and around physical water coolers around what's happening in city government. And so, as I mentioned before, I imagine there's like uncertainty, right? And not knowing what this means. I think there's sort of been this anticipation that maybe like mayoral administrations would change. I sort of think Mayor Adams upset a lot of people. Maybe this is what sort of triggered people to look into him, but it doesn't discount, right? If you really did do something inappropriate, you gotta, you called attention to yourself, and now it's sort of like the things are unfolding, I guess, as a result of certain actions that people and choices that they made. And so um, I can imagine with the resignations, with the raids, and now the official indictment of Mayor Adams, that there's, really just some conversations that are happening with people who work in city government, the hundreds of thousands of employees that work in city government. And so I sort of want to talk about this. Like, we have a lot of folks who've resigned since that indictment has come out. And we'll talk a bit about the charges and all of that in a second and react to it. But the list is major. And we're talking like, these agencies are major agencies. So we definitely had Commissioner Kavanaugh was one that really shocked me. She resigned back in August, and that one really caught me by surprise. But someone who actually I think was really well regarded. Of course, she had lawsuits, but I think people weren't happy with maybe her new approach to leadership. But folks really thought that she was doing a great job. But she resigned back in August and was sort of like, this job is all consuming and I'm done. Bye. We had Edward Caban, who was the second commissioner in this administration, resigned back in September. Now we have three commissioners in one administration, now that we think about it. And Tom Donlin is like now being also, I guess, investigated, and they're trying to assess what his involvement is in all this mess.
Fits right in perfectly with the...
oh my goodness.
Take a position, get rated.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, this is insane. The chief counsel obviously stepped down. We had the commissioner of DOHMH step down, Chancellor Banks. That really surprised me, but he said that he was going to be stepping down this month as well. And we'll talk about that sort of fast tracking that popped up today. Today's October 3rd.
Fascinating. You texted me that this morning. I had not even seen that yet.
It's insane. But so we're talking about major agencies. We're like multi-billion-dollar agencies that now their leadership is changing. So funny thing, I was doing a search just to kind of get a full list of all the resignations that have happened in the last few months. And when you do a Google search for New York City agency commissioner resignation, Google sort of does these like sort of suggestions and searches. Mm-hmm. The next one down is resignation letter. So, oh my gosh, like who only knows what's going on? Like you can't make this stuff up. It's so crazy. So I wanted to dish a bit. Like, what are your reactions to all these, obviously like the raids, the resignations, which I guess we knew were coming from the raids, and now it's like officially an indictment. So what are your reactions? What have you been hearing too?
When you first texted me saying that we should do another episode, I thought back to the conversation that you had with your dad, right? Also a former city employee, and something that came up, and I think you mentioned in the intro here, was just how, the city workforce, city government gets a bad rap for a lot of things. And as we know, whether current employees like city employees or former city employees, people that we've worked with, there's some amazing people there. Mm-hmm. This is a workforce of 300,000 people. Yeah. That's bigger than like the Apples, the Googles, all those big companies that you can name. It's probably bigger than some of them combined. And there's so many amazing people there. And it's so sad and frustrating when things like this happen, because it really is just another shot at a shot that people could use to say, oh, look, city government is corrupt, or like you said, people become jaded or distracted. And it's such a bad look for the city, for city government, for city services. And are city employees going to work every day and doing their jobs? Absolutely. Is it a distraction? No doubt.
Yeah.
And it seems like this administration has been distracted from day one. Clearly, if you're reading any of the indictment and even stuff before that, within weeks, I would say, of the new administration coming in, you, me, many other people became keenly aware of what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like they've been distracted from day one and focused on things of, their own personal gain, whether it be financial or power-wise. So it's really just a sad day for city government. Yeah. And it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And again, I don't think it's so distracting that you're not doing your job, but it has been the first thing that has come up on every call or meeting that I've had since it happened that would have been what, last Tuesday or Wednesday since
Yeah.
it broke.
Yeah.
And now with the news this morning, in our particular agency here, with the chancellor moving up his departure. I mean, when there's leadership changes, does
Yeah.
it change your day to day so much? Yes or no? I think the new chancellor, Ramos, Vilas Ramos, if she stays, I'm thinking now, how long is she going to stay?
Right.
What's her vision for the department? I'm sure now other senior leaders are going to leave. Priorities change, strategies change, different, and this thing is a beast to move. So now, are you going to come to work and do your job? Absolutely, but to change paths and change priorities, it's not so easy.
Yeah.
And to do it under these circumstances, it's just sad, really.
Yeah.
You could get annoyed, you get frustrated, but it's such a bad look for city government and for our city as a whole, even if you're not just, this is international news,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's just, it's not good. And it doesn't seem like it's the end. If you listen to the district attorney's office, from the Southern District, I mean, Damian Williams, who is leading this indictment, he is no joke. If you
Mm-hmm.
read anything about him,
Mm-hmm.
he is very serious, and they do not bring charges against people willy-nilly.
Right. Yeah. Someone had
Like
said
they're
that to
asking,
me recently. It's like they're not going to do this and then get egg in their face, right? And make charges
they
sort
ask
of
you
like
questions
without due
that they already
diligence.
know, right? They ask you questions that they already know the answers to,
Right.
and they are not messing around. And they said I think it was yesterday when he had to go back to court. They said that they believe, the Southern District believes that there will be more charges brought against them. So it's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good, and
Yeah.
honestly, it's a sad situation for our city and for city government.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it definitely is like the ripple effects were the first thing that came to my mind. And when I first saw the news of the chancellor resigning, I was actually commuting home, and I was just like flabbergasted. I mean, I guess and you saw sort of the writing was on the wall because you had other people resigning. There were these rumors of like these connections, right, that people had to Adams and maybe some of the things that were manifesting, right, with these charges that were sort of looming and pending and with the investigations and such. But then to see it, like, I guess I sort of naively was like, okay, it's just sort of like isolated to Adams, but slowly but surely now you're seeing it's affecting other people. And then, yeah, we have yet to see. I will give you credit because I texted and I was like, we have to talk. We have to do this recording. We have to do this episode like as soon as possible. Like, now's the time. We have to get going. And you're like, wait, let's see what happens over the course of the week. And it was such great wisdom because it's like every day, even like jokingly today, we're like, okay, it's morning time and let's see what happens by this afternoon. But as crazy as it is, like just in a matter of days, like so much has changed. We have the chancellor, first saying he was going to sort of retire by the end of the year. And then now just basically sort of gave 2 weeks notice, which is crazy and also sad. I agree. It's like, despite my differences in sort of how things played out when the transition happened, it is leadership, it's vision, and it's a lot of work that people have invested in to then have that gone so suddenly is really shocking. And I imagine not only for, the employees, but for parents and for communities and right, all the folks that are connected because the DOE it's vast. I mean, it's the largest school system in the country. And then just the ripple effects of this, I think, are just really what sticks with me. And I agree with you about sort of like feeling a sense of sadness and disappointment too, right? And it is, I think the thing that sticks with me about certain things in life in general is like when we have these stereotypes or these generalizations about people and then they turn out to be true. And I'm just like, come on, man. Like, why do we have to,
Yeah, I would rather
why
be
is this
wrong
true?
about it,
Yeah.
right? I'd rather be wrong about it
Why is this true?
right.
Yeah.
And to the like a sub bullet as you're talking about the chancellor and the transition and all that, I think we've both worked through maybe two or three mayoral transitions and we worked through under different chancellors. There's definitely uncertainty, but there's also clarity, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
when this administration came in, you're kind of like, okay, we're going to have a new mayor. We're most like, we're definitely going to have a new chancellor. We're probably going to have a new deputy chancellor. Like you kind of, even though it was vague, you knew. Um, this is uncertainty with like more anxiety and uncertainty sprinkled on top of it because you don't know is okay, he's leaving in 2 weeks. Is Melissa staying on board? Is the mayor still going to be here?
Hmm.
For his the last months of his administration, just so many open-ended questions. So it's like uncertainty on top of anxiety on top of more uncertainty.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
extra tricky.
Yeah.
Not good.
And I think of like sort of other, I'll sort of equate this to a scandal, but like when Spitzer had to resign, you had like David Patterson, but it was like, sort of his second in command. So I feel like there was not much of an impact because it was someone who was sort of like next in line. And then,
Yeah.
he was in office for a period of time where it wasn't maybe so disruptive of like, hey, we have new leadership now. We'll have some for a little bit and then a new group will come in. Same with Andrew Cuomo. Like you had Kathy Hochul take
Same thing.
over. She
Yeah.
got reelected. So at
Hmm.
least there was a little bit of stability there. But I feel like the whole new sort of the slew of people who are now running for mayor under the Democratic ticket because of things that have been happening. I mean, to be fair, I think this was people were inspired before the scandal even came out because I think people maybe feel a little bamboozled. I personally do. I voted for Mayor Adams, and I feel like he ran on a I'm for the people and I want to innovate and like do great things in New York City. And then I think what wound up happening, and he's the first mayor to be indicted ever. Feels like very Tweed, right? That Tweed bossman mentality. I'm like, wait, we're in
100%.
2024. We're supposed to be
Yep.
modernizing. Why are we
Yep.
going back to this? But definitely was an administration of loyalty and friendships. I mean, I personally, I know I don't know what rock I was living under. So I knew there were these relationships, but I did not know that Chancellor Banks was in a relationship with a deputy mayor. And I do want to talk about conflict of interest because when we talk about the indictment, I'm like, come on now. But the fact that you had all these relationships to me just shows you like there definitely was, and we experienced this a lot of like personal relationships and protecting people got in the way of doing of certain work happening, right? Like wanting to have the right skilled people in the right places. It was more about bringing in people, friends, family, apparently, close like colleagues and loyalists and putting them in
Right.
these key positions that maybe they weren't the most effective for, but it was like all about relationships, right? Like Vin
Yep.
Diesel, it's all about family. It definitely was in this administration, right? And so it's I think that's maybe why like this is having such a profound effect because all these people were so connected. And yes, there is a lot of value. Like I can say if ever there were an opportunity where I could hire people, like, yes, it's important to know folks, to have those relationships, to know people that can do good work. Like that's, an aspect that you can't get from just like open searches sometimes because someone can come across as great and then they're crazy or don't know what they're talking about or they make things up. So, I think there is a benefit, of course, to knowing people and to having relationships and knowing the work that they do.
People
But
that you
this
could trust,
definitely,
right?
right,
That level, right?
right.
That's understandable.
Right. But this
But
also
this
just
just
was
takes it to the
different.
extreme.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
was just like different. Like I was going back on like all these posts that I've been saving even over the past, year or so. And you have folks who are put into these positions and then you find out they're a spouse of someone or folks getting contracts and they're a spouse of someone. And like, it's just like a lot of kind of underhanded things that were happening. So it's just it's again, it is really sad. But all that to say, I'm like sort of circling back to like who is next then, right? So I feel like this disruption really is real and different because we are going to have like this interim leadership. So like going back to the de Blasio administration, you had Richard Carranza leave and then you had Misha Porter come in for a period of time. And you knew that was short term, but that was because he was term limited, right? You knew there was going to be a new mayor. It was like interim leadership. But even with that, she was trying to move certain work forward. But now you have this sort of like scandal that now is disrupting. So you are going to have interim leadership, but the chances of like the next mayor being someone that's aligned with Mayor Adams, I think is like not likely. Like Brad Lander is very different. There's like other people in the election pool now, these candidates, I think they're all going to be very different. So it's going to be like sort of like we're stopping, we're kind of like in a purgatory, I don't know, for a little bit of time, or like in a sense of like, unsure of what to do and what to move forward. And if things do move forward, and we talk about this, definitely want to talk about this later, but then, okay, so you're moving work forward, but then there's going to be new vision, new leadership and all that coming in. And, just a matter of like months, really, if you think about it, that time will go really fast. And so it's just, yeah, that is, I think, like a big struggle and
Yeah.
unfortunate because it does affect the employees, of course, but it affects the services you deliver, the outcomes you deliver. I just feel like we're constantly, yeah, like you said, like going off on tangents and diverting onto paths. And it's just a unfortunate mess that
You
maybe
be
not
yeah.
everyone sees.
No, people would. I've seen some people say, "Oh, it's not a distraction," or it doesn't. I mean, honestly, I think they're sadly mistaken or
Hmm.
just not paying close enough attention. And when you think about when this administration came in, we had, I don't know what the right term is to use with COVID because, I don't want to say like it completely ended, like who knows, but I'll say we were coming out of that really tough time, and it was such an opportunity to do great things in arguably the greatest city in the world, right?
Yeah.
And this administration, they didn't want to do any of that. They just wanted to do favors for their friends, put their friends in not just positions, but powerful positions
Hmm.
with a lot of influence, with a lot of sway, with making a lot of money, able to direct taxpayer dollars in certain ways. You want to give your friend a job? Give them some BS job somewhere off, I don't know, in the outer boroughs or something. Don't make them the first deputy mayor. Don't make them the chancellor of the school system. Don't like that. That's a tough sell.
Yeah.
That's a tough sell, and they squandered it away.
Yeah.
It's a bad look, and
Yeah.
it's frustrating.
Yeah. And it's already May 2023. I had hosted an episode because it's just a reaction back then to sort of this constantly creating, I call them diverging paths to progress in New York City. So it was one just with myself, but just thinking about the effects of mayoral transitions and how they create these diverging paths. So, again, to create that graphic, if you haven't listened to that episode or trying to sort of paint that image in your head, it's like, okay, you have, someone who's running the city for 8 years. Each of these mayors and their administrations come in with these big ideas. Everybody wants to have like that landmark key initiative or a series of key initiatives that move, I guess, put them on the map, right? Like create a legacy for their mayoral administration, which is understandable. However, it's sort of like then you think about the work and what that means. In some instances, it's good, right? Because it's new direction, like the world changes, you have to be adaptable, etc. But you also have, and I just like sort of reflect on this transition specifically, where you have people coming in based on certain personal beliefs, based on personal priorities, on sometimes their preferences. They're putting in these policies that take you off a path that you were working on, right? So I say if we're thinking about education, like something so fundamental, so crucial, so impactful as education, you have differing opinions on curriculum, on approach. You have, different prioritization of initiatives and those that get funding. So when you have a new administration, all of those priorities change, all of those investments change. Direction certainly has changed in the mayoral initiatives, right? So then now here we are. You're going to be changing leadership, right? Sort of like the second tier of leadership. And what are people going to be doing? Are they going to be sort of just trying to keep the lights on, doors open, or are they going to be trying to chart their own path, right? So like, again, citing under de Blasio, we had multiple chancellors, and each chancellor, not only the mayor, but each chancellor wanted to come in, each commissioner wants to come in, all these agency heads may want to have their own stamp on things, right? Which is understandable. It's leadership, it's your legacy, it's your career, etc. But then for the direction and then the outcome for your services, the direction for your staff, like the investment of resources, all of those things, it sort of seems like just like this veinous system of, rather than us say, hey, we're focusing and this is the direction we want for like our parks, this is the direction for our waterfronts, this is what we want for education. All these things take a really long time. Like any small change that you make in your life, you're like, hey, it takes time to do. But in trying to move 8 million people and like all these services, we expect these sort of like fast results, unfortunately, which I think sometimes are unreasonable. But then in doing so, it's like we kind of set up people and then new leadership comes in, and it's sort of like this I'll say generational or administrative based sort of like shift in philosophy and approach, etc. And so we just keep going down this path, and now I'm just like, okay, here we are again, and why aren't we talking about this, about how we can manage New York City better so we're not hinging so much on individuals, right? Like, yes, legacy is important, yes, work is important, but we are diverting and affecting so many people's lives based on a change in someone. And it's
Hmm.
like the name on the door, and that drives me crazy. I'm like, oh, here we go. We're gonna have to update logos. We're gonna have to change the names on doors. All this money, right? It's just like a lot of shit that's wasteful because a name changes, right?
Yeah.
And then all the work that changes. And I'm just like, this is really, that also is sad. And it pisses me off because I'm like, why are we attaching so much to this? Like, it's certain things make sense. But I really do think as like a city, we have to start detaching some of this work from the individual, because it really is just wasteful and distracting and ineffective and inefficient. So this has definitely been front of mind, and I like want this to be like a big outcome, hopefully, of what people, the conversations maybe that we're having.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just wanted to sort of see if you have any thoughts. Like, you are a city kid, you are a city employee, you are a city dad, and so yeah, does that have, do you feel the same? I mean, I think we sort of had conversations about this, but
Oh yes, and I think I can't remember if it was in regards to education, but we definitely had a conversation around this before, where I think you said that something should just not be based on who the commissioner and or the mayor is. Like you said something about like parks, right? And you say parks, what comes to mind is the waterfront, climate change, climate resiliency, things like that. Also, education is obviously a big thing. Like there should just be things that are standard operating procedure, and it doesn't matter who the governor is, who the mayor is, who your city council member is. Like these are things that we are just going to do, and we're going to stay the course and just continue
right.
to push them forward and make them better and improve them, and not go back and forth or go down a different path. So I'm with you, and I see in the notes that you put together for the show when you talk about mayoral control. I think that is going to be next.
Oh,
I'm not sure. Can't
yes.
remember when it comes up again. Maybe 2 years now. But I mean, this instance will definitely be cited as a reason not to continue it or put more guardrails against it. Because look at the situation here. It's a politically appointed position. Now, I don't know if the old way, like the board of ed, I know that, where there's people, there's problems.
Right.
So, it had its issues. So I don't know
Right.
if that's the perfect model,
Yeah.
but I think there needs to be some type of change when it comes to this. It's clearly it's becoming too political.
Yeah.
Why is New York City public schools, why is that a political position? They leverage that position and positions within the organization in a political way. And why?
Yeah, it's a fair
Um,
point.
you cited me, we're obviously both parents. Look at pre-K. That came in, big, big discussion now. What's happening with 3K? What's happening with pre-K? Luckily, my daughter is got into the pre-K program where she went to 3K, where she went to preschool. It's, up the block from where we live. But you're hearing horror stories about
Yeah.
families not getting seats or
Yeah.
having to travel quite a bit for a seat. That is a direct impact of leadership changing over and them not prioritizing this
Right.
program, which I think you talk to any parent, I mean, it's
Oh,
a win-win
yeah, it's
for
amazing.
anyone. Really? I mean,
It's
how could
game
you argue,
changing.
right?
Yeah,
How could you argue
absolutely.
that this is not good? Could it have, I mean, we say this all the time. Was it perfect? God, no. But was it
Hmm.
really good? Yes, it was
Yeah.
really good. And being a parent and having my daughter in 3K and pre-K, it's a lifesaver.
Yeah.
It's a lifesaver. We talk about the foundation of a city and of a community. Like, come on. So stuff like that, I'm 100% with you. And I don't
Yeah.
know what the model is, but
Yeah.
whatever we're doing now,
Yeah. It's not
it's
working.
no, it's certainly not
This
working.
ain't it. It ain't it. Yeah, it's really
No,
sad.
no.
And yeah, I think to your point, like we do need broader strategies, longer term strategies, and maybe there are things that, maybe, and yeah, I think it's also the struggle too with government, and we've seen it all the time. Like just because something was written in paper 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we have to adhere to that. Like I think we also have to build in flexibility too. So, in response to the times, if you need something, you can't buy from certain sites because of a policy that existed a million years ago. So we're not like being competitive. We're doing, things because the paper says so a long time ago. And it really is, it's a shame because we should, as one of the, like, oh my gosh, talk about like hubs of the world. It's absolutely true. Like we should definitely be able to be a little bit more innovative and forward thinking, but we are stuck in a lot of politics, and it's yeah, this it's not it. So it's, yes, absolutely, wholeheartedly agree with you on all of those things. And how dare I forget about mayoral control? Oh my gosh, people are going to say something. I'll contain myself for 3 seconds.
I was also going to say too, as I'm looking at some of the notes here as well, I think this is getting a ton of attention and rightfully so. I think it's pretty wild that this is also a presidential election year where
Yeah.
there's just heightened awareness maybe on obviously on national politics, but um, it's like, some people kind of saying, oh, the everyday New Yorker might not care about this, or, I've been seeing some of that discourse. But I think, to a conversation like this, or we're very vocal about it, and I know like our partners do different things than us, right? They haven't worked in city government. So like when my wife hears that, I don't know if she would know all of these things going on. Okay, the mayor of New York got indicted, but do you
Right.
actually understand
Yeah.
the ripple effect of that, and how deep it goes, and some of the things that have been going on, and how it's going to directly impact the things happening in the city, or the ability of the city to kind of continue to take those next steps and be a leader on whatever front we're talking about, because New York
Right.
is a world-class city and you want to keep it that way. And that position is in charge with doing those things.
Yeah.
And when they are distracted or looking out for their well-being, financial or personal, or their friends, they don't have their eye on the prize.
Yeah.
And we suffer from that. And
Yeah.
because this thing is such a big bureaucracy, it's going to take a long time to get it back where it needs to be.
Right.
Getting the right people in place, setting the right vision, executing on those things, that takes a long time. That could take years, because I feel like a lot of damage has been done. And
Yeah.
this is really, I don't want to say the nail in the coffin, but
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to come back from this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, sort of what you said makes me think about so much to say in like so little time.
We have a part two,
Oh
part
my
three.
gosh, yeah, we do need to
There
have a
might be
part
more
two,
news
part
next
three.
week.
Yeah, there might be
Yeah.
more news next week. But yeah, I'll just say like it is, it's, I think to your point of, sort of like trying to maybe make like incremental change. And it's hard, right? I think for me, I also think of like all the investment that was made and work that happens. Like I also think about like community engagement that happened and attempts at that. All that stuff I feel like just kind of gets wiped away. So we do fall back into this like political leaders sort of the folks who are already in politics, right? Like these sort of things kind of exchange hands, and thinking about like who's next, right? And what would their philosophy, their approach be? But I think there's just sort of like this relationship and maybe this like implicit or yeah, I'm like sort of this like muted understanding that when you become mayor of New York City, these are like sort of the ways that you operate. And this is sort of like the autonomy that you have and how things have to be. And then I just really question, like, is that the case? And it definitely is like a conversation that we'll probably have to delve into a little bit more. But all that you said, it's just like also kind of makes me think, okay, well, what's next and who's next? And is it going to be any different? 'Cause it just feels like after
Yeah.
so many administrations, they all kind of do the same thing. Like Bloomberg had his initiatives and his vision and the things that he prioritized, and he had a style to the people that he brought in as well. Like I think he had a lean toward business people, toward folks with law degrees, very professional, sort of conventional uh professionals, right? Like that was definitely his thing. I think de Blasio
Hmm.
was a little bit more open, and you had a lot of young people and people of different backgrounds and of different mindsets. And definitely with Adams, I think it's like a different to your point, like these friends and family special over the past few years, which is crazy, but that's a style of government, right? Like people do. Some it's like I want to bring in people that I trust and that I am familiar with, and a circle is stronger than something else. And he definitely fortified that circle, but they're all styles. And so what's the next person's style going to be? And I think we do tend to see trends. And I really do hope that changes. And then how do we sort of be stewards of
Hmm.
that change and get people to be more vocal and to understand these things? I do think it is always opaque. It is not something that people are clear of like how it affects their lives, but it definitely does. Like I would just say an example of like Mayor Adams coming in. It's like school meals changed because he's a vegan. People don't know that, but it's true. And then he was really adamant about, us changing our reading curriculum, and also like focusing on dyslexia, which is important, but like a lot of personal things came into factor or to determine, right? Like what not only was prioritized, we also changed a lot of things too. And yeah, it's just like it's a curiosity of like who's going to come in, what's going to be their philosophy, and is the approach going to be the same? And it's just like, oh, we'll just have to deal with it for 8 years, go on like a different path for 8 years. Maybe we'll get, our kids will get their circle pizzas back with pepperoni, and maybe they won't. I don't know. I'll try and advocate for that too. Like bring that back. It's like a
I,
it's part of
as
our
you're saying
childhood,
it,
damn it. But yeah, it's a lot of
the,
changes.
the next person for me, they're going to have to earn my trust. And I think they're going to really have to earn the trust of New Yorkers, because what is happening here,
Yeah.
you're seeing that be undermined,
Yeah.
right? Like people already are skeptical of whatever, it's big business, institutions, government. This not only doesn't help, but it makes it worse.
Yeah.
So that person for me is going to have to build back that trust and be transparent, be open, be honest, and just be operating with integrity. I
Mm-hmm.
think for as long as we've known each other and have been involved in local politics or taken an interest in, any type of politics, state politics, city politics, it's amazing the just the level of corruption that we just casually accept.
Yeah.
Like people will be like, yeah, I think the casual New Yorker might be like, oh yeah, he took some money from a foreign entity, but if you really understand what was happening,
Sure.
you should be pissed off,
Sure.
and you should be concerned. You should be concerned why a foreign government, why they want our mayor in their pocket,
Mm-hmm.
right? You want to
Mm-hmm.
talk, I mean, you want to talk about the ecosystem, right? So like foreign money coming into New York, impacting real estate prices, impacting this, that, and the other thing of everyday New Yorkers.
Sure.
You should be very concerned whether they gave
Sure.
him $5 or 5,000 or 50,000.
Yeah.
You should be concerned that they are eyeing people in power in our city and getting them in their pocket and being able to influence them and dictate what they do. Right? It's more than, oh yeah, he got a building permit for the Turkish consulate. Who cares? It's way deeper than that. It is
Yeah.
way deeper than that. And
Yeah.
you know, definitely don't want that happening.
Yeah.
Definitely, we can't have that happening. I
Yeah.
think it's New York City, it's New York State. The capital is also historically very corrupt, right? Look at Andrew Cuomo, three men in a room, three people in a room, and I think we just casually accept that,
Yeah.
and we shouldn't.
Yeah.
And I always, we send each other podcasts or things. My man Errol Lewis from New
Yeah.
York One, he's amazing. And I think it was one of the first podcasts I listened to after the indictment came down, and he said it way more eloquently than I'm going to say it, but said something to the effect of, I hear Eric Adams talking about, I deserve due process, I deserve this, and he goes, what do we deserve as New Yorkers?
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't we deserve? He's not
Yeah.
saying, sure, you deserve due process, you deserve innocent until proven guilty, but don't we deserve better as New Yorkers?
Yeah.
Like 100% every time we do.
Yeah.
Because this is nonsense.
Yeah.
This is nonsense. And
Yeah.
we don't deserve it, right?
Yeah.
We deserve better as
Yeah.
employees and as citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely like one thing that happened personally within the last few months is in my community, we lost a lot. So it was state funding, to be fair. But we lost a series of after school programs in our neighborhood. Now the rumor is that it's as a result of the state chipping in for the migrant shelters. I don't know if that's propaganda or if it's true. But in either instance, right? Like I had done a lot of outreach to every elected official that represents us in New York City, because that has an impact for thousands of people in my community alone. And I got lots of stock language of like, oh, this was a solicitation and we did a solicitation that was competitive and we just don't have funding, right? And that I never got an answer to that was like human and cared about myself for all the other families, right, that were being impacted by this. And like after school is so important. Like, what am I supposed to do with my kid from 2 to 6 in the afternoon? Like, yes, I could go find a paid program, but good luck finding a paid program, because just like with childcare, rent is so damn expensive. You have trouble finding people, and it's, getting them from one place to the other, and all of those things. So it's like really complex and impacts working families. It impacts safety of kids. It impacts places for them to be that's not surfing on subway trains, having influences from, responsible adults as opposed to teens and them getting into trouble. Like, it's a lot of things. That doesn't get an answer, but someone gets to send a text, and then like they get a political favor. Like, that is the problem. Like, it's a major problem that affects, a certain subgroup of people, but that doesn't affect like their day to day. It doesn't impact their work. It doesn't impact their safety, so it definitely is like a total just like conflict of interest, and why these things, why these sort of like regulations exist. Like you shouldn't be able to call in political favors. Obviously it happens all the time. And I agree with you
Right.
1,000%. Like we always accept there's a certain level of shadiness that goes on, and it's just like par for the course. And I guess it's true. And then I think in this instance, honestly, I think if like Adams didn't push it too much with people, like he just seemed very inflexible in everything. Like if something was wrong, it wasn't my fault. That's how he
Hmm.
also, right, led his agencies. We have SNAP things not being processed. It's not our fault. We have pre-K programs not getting paid. It's not our fault. Like all of this deflection, it always was like never his fault. And so, I
Two
think
things.
he peed off a lot of people. And that's, I think, why we're paying attention. But like we should always be paying attention. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
I mean, as you're saying this too, two things more recently that just stick out. You're like, the NYPD was basically operating like a mafia operation where they were shaking people down.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, is that Mayor Adams directing them to do that? I don't know. I don't think so. But it's also the people that you keep around you and the person that you put in power that clearly they knew that it would fly, that you would not do anything about that. And to your point,
Yeah.
you can't be someone that takes the credit for the good and then doesn't take the credit for the bad. He's very much a buck stops with me type of person.
Mm-hmm.
You're a former police officer. That was your bread and butter, what you ran on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the new commissioner who you pushed out the old commissioner because she was trying to do the right thing from what
Right.
I read, but
Yeah.
couldn't get into the all boys club or
Yep.
whatever they call it, had banks hanging over her. So now this guy and his brother are basically using the NYPD as a mafia shakedown
Mm-hmm.
unit. Pay me or you're not going to be able to open, or we're going to put violations, or we're going to
Insane.
like that's insane. And then also the thing with the sheriff's office, which I think flew under the radar a little bit, but that they were going into these pot shops and illegally taking money from them and not vouchering it. And where was it going? It was going into their pocket or going into the safe in the office. That's absurd.
Yeah.
I actually, in my neighborhood, there was a pot shop open illegally, and the kid said, yeah, we're open illegally because I can't get an answer from the Office of Cannabis Management about my license, and I'm paying rent, so I have to open, and I'll
Yeah.
just said the sheriff's office, he goes, they are raiding places and taking money illegally. He told that to me a year ago.
Thanks.
And so now, look, this comes out. And again, is the mayor saying you could do that? I doubt it,
Yeah.
but it's that, do you have someone in charge that is doing the right thing,
Sure.
that's operating with integrity? No, you have someone that's willing to push the boundaries and
Yep.
he's not paying attention. Yeah, we could just run wild here.
And I
Sends a
just,
message, right?
yeah. And I just want to say, like, as a city employee, conflict of interest is like
Oh my God.
the beginning of the hiring process. So I don't want to hear you didn't
Yeah.
know. And I don't want to hear that you didn't
As
think that those
annoying
were
and
like good
long as
things or
that thing
bad
is,
things. Oh,
it is
yeah.
very clear what you can and cannot
When
do.
you get hired,
Very
you
clear.
sign off on conflict of interest. Like you have, like you can't even go like, yeah, we're out walking together. We're at a training together. You're a vendor and I'm a person who works for the city. You can't even so much as buy me a sandwich. And then that's like it's sort of like an implication that I'm going to lend you, right? Like you can always call me for a favor. Like you take nothing from no one is really the message that they give you in the city.
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
You
Don't
take nothing
anything
from no one. If
anybody.
they send you cookies, you send that shit back. You leave
Right,
them in the
exactly.
street and you let like the
Yeah.
rats eat them. And Mayor Adams loves his rats. They're all
Better
funded
safe
by
than
like
sorry.
vendor sandwiches and cookies. But it's very clear. And we get training on it every single year.
Not a secret.
We get
Not a
emails
secret.
and we have trainings that we have to click through. And there are scenarios that tell you, what does this seem like? Is this considered an expectation for a quid pro quo and all that? So you cannot say, and I looked, his like a career, like you said, in NYPD for 20 years. He was borough president. He was in state senate. I'm sure state laws are the same about conflict of interest. You cannot say you didn't know. And this is like big stuff. So I'm like, and everything else is like, I feel bad saying it, but I'm like, yeah, I'm just kind of happy that karma's playing out, but like, I don't want to hear this fake news that this is just like people coming after you in a witch hunt. If these things are true, there's no way that you can say that you didn't understand the implications of what people will be coming to you for and like cashing in. And this is just what we know and what they have on him. But I'm sure, like you said, and like all these sort of things that are happening silently in these agencies, who knows what was said that was not documented or not, on the radar at the moment. But it's just like, you can't play that. It's very clear when you work in city or state government, I guess in any government capacity, you don't accept things from people that eventually can come back and like be cashed in as a favor. So
Keep it very
can't claim
simple,
that.
like you
Can't
said.
claim
Yeah,
that.
nope,
Yeah.
that's not gonna fly.
Not going to
That
fly.
is no.
Not going to fly. So,
And to the point too, sorry, to the
no,
point
yeah.
where, the line about him saying, "Oh, people are coming after me because I stood up for you," blah blah blah. I mean, look who picked up that line within 2 or 3 days. Donald Trump.
Yep.
That is a line right out of the Republican playbook and Donald Trump's Republican playbook. Like, come on.
Yeah.
If you listen to Damian Williams talk, which I did this morning on the Errol Lewis podcast. He has him on. It's not an interview, but he plays snippets from him.
Yeah.
They make it very clear. We do not take orders from the White House. They have a very clear. They might be appointed. Damian Williams might be appointed by the president, but that office, before me, during me, and after me, this office operates independently from Washington or anyone else. We have a very clear mandate to uphold the law, and that's what we do. It is not, and the staying on this topic, the migrant shelters, I mean, I said from the very beginning, if you're a good manager and you're a good mayor, you would handle this. It is your job to have a relationship with the governor. It is your job to have a relationship with Washington. Don't cry when they don't help you and then make a big stink out of it. Does it cause issues? We see through education. Is it an issue that we have an influx of migrant children that don't speak English and speak different languages and have, trauma, dealing with trauma? 100%.
Yeah.
But what are you doing to take care of the issue instead of standing behind the podium complaining about it? Manage the situation. That's what you signed up for. It's New York City. You're going to get all types of things thrown at you.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to hear whining and complaining about the federal government isn't doing enough. It's your job to work with them. It's your job to work with the state. And he just politicized the hell out of that issue. Like, I go out to Floyd Benefield. I play sports out there. Is that some glamorous thing? Like, you think people want to be living in the middle of a field somewhere? But he took it. He politicized it. And again, am I ignorant to the fact that it hasn't put any strain on our city? Like, no, let's be real. I could hold two things in my head at the same time. That I could hold that in my head and also think that, and you should have done a better job of managing that and not politicizing it and not make people be able to turn and be like, oh, it's because of the migrants.
Yeah.
You gave people permission to talk shit like that.
Yeah.
It's just highly inappropriate.
Yeah.
And just wrong at the end of the day.
Yeah. Came up in our VP debate, and I was like, don't you know the housing crisis in the United States is because of all the illegal people who are coming into our country? I'm like, this
a right-wing talking point.
There's a lot of dynamics to
lo
that.
and behold, you were letting Tim Pearson sign off on emergency contracts that he was benefiting from connected to the migrant shelters. Well, shocker. I'm surprised, fascinating that the issue didn't get solved.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a cash cow for certain people, right? That it's extremely convenient. So sad. So, I think we can definitely more to delve into here. And like, I know it's like time flies when you are having fun. This is like such an amazing thing. And, I think the important thing from this is like, it's easy. And I think this is where I get frustrated sometimes with people. Is like, it's really easy to shit talk and to criticize people. Like, I know government is not easy. Taking on these roles is not easy. However, like, you do have to have integrity. You have to have accountability. And this has like been a big letdown. But I agree with you. Like, I think a big takeaway from this is like, not just to trash, because that's not the intention of this conversation. It's like, hey, people need to understand that this has real operational impacts, but it also has like generational impacts, right, on people's futures. Like, we're talking about education and a new approach to things, potentially with new leadership, new vision, new direction. And we're sort of falling into this like whirlpool, doing the same things over and over again. So it's like, one, getting people to wake up, to understand, or not wake up, but like, maybe giving people more information, empowering them with information so that they understand, right? And people kind of also like maybe waking up and like realizing, hopefully this does sort of open people's eyes, I guess is the better way of saying it, to what the things that happen, and not just accepting it, but like kind of being vocal and demanding something different. So, when it comes to the new people who are stepping up, how are you going to be different? How is this going to be? How are you going to manage? How are you going to lead? It is a leadership position. It is a management position, but it's just as much as like an inspiration person and the leadership, someone who has integrity, who has vision, who has strategy. Like we need more of that, like a lot
Yeah.
more of that
And those should
in
be
city
above it
government.
being a political position. I
Absolutely.
understand it is politics, but at the end of the day, all those things you listed should be way higher on the list than
Absolutely.
I'm a politician. No.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have a lot of people who bounce around from one role to the other, and that just always makes me anxious. Like you mentioned, Andrew Cuomo, like there's rumors that he's trying to sort of like be in the background here. And it's like we have people who have resigned in scandal that are standing by to take over New York City. Do I think he's not a good politician? I think he also got a little, I think people were really upset about his COVID response. And he also, like, they were trying to come for him too. So, but I'm like, hey, this is what we're going back to. Like someone else who resigned in scandal is going to take over New York City. And it's like a well-regarded name, of course, like Cuomo's very, well known, the name in New York and New York State and such. But that doesn't mean that that's what we have to go
We
back to, the
deserve
names and
better.
the
We deserve
politicians. We
better.
need
It's New
something new,
York.
something different. So I hope this is like just gets people sort of maybe paying more attention, like who's stepping up, what are they bringing to the table, how are they going to do things differently? Because this is just not working, and we're just sort of doing this
The
in
stakes are
perpetuity
high.
here.
The
Yeah,
stakes are high right now. The stakes are
absolutely,
high. Like I said, I
absolutely.
feel like when we quote unquote, however you want to frame it, came out of COVID or whatever with this administration, you're thinking we got to do some stuff. This is big. People were hurting for a long time, right? And
Yeah,
that's what you're seeing the result of, people living on the edge and then that happening and just falling off. And now what are we doing to keep the city like first class?
yeah,
That's that, and like you're saying, we just we deserve better.
yeah,
And I hope people are paying closer attention at this point.
yeah,
We're certainly doing our part.
yeah. We're trying. And if you're listening, tell a friend, tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your grandma, tell your grandpa, tell everybody.
I have to shout out, and I know I've sent them to you, like we exchange, good podcasts or articles or whatever. But on New York One,
Yeah.
off topic on politics with Courtney Gross every Friday. She's awesome, and
Love
I
it.
can't remember the names of the other reporters on there, but they're amazing. Errol Lewis, also
Yep.
on New York One. His podcast, I believe, is You Decide, and he puts it out either every Wednesday or Thursday. He's amazing. And then FAQ New York, which is through The City, that is the name of the publication. It's Katie Honan, Harry Siegel, and Christina Greer. I think she's an academic, Christina Greer, but she's like also a journalist or whatever they have her on as a guest. But those are my three go-to, and a
Yeah.
lot of the things that I learn about, quick updates, like they're on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. But those are my three main podcasts. Just incredible work that they do. And if you listen to those, you will be well informed, and you will be paying attention.
Yeah.
100%.
I love it. Love it. And they fuel us with content
Yeah.
and ideas, and hopefully we'll fuel them with some content and ideas, right? Because
I try.
yeah. Listen, I think, all those things are super important, and it's also like different vantage points and perspectives, right? Like I talked to the guy, a taxi driver. I talked to my doctor. You talk to all these people, women at a checkout in the supermarket. Like there's people, everyday people here in New York City who can have really real, substantive conversations with you about things that they see that they wish are better, or experiences that they had in growing up here, and things that they navigate that, like, we just don't hear from them, right? Like really insightful things. So like, yes, I will definitely put those podcasts, links to those podcasts in the show notes, because I think it is good to hear about like things from different perspectives, to hear about them from different people, and definitely to stay on top of stuff. Like, unfortunately, I do feel like sometimes news is not news. It's more, you don't get a lot of stuff. So it's just a great way, or you're hearing about a lot, right? There's so much going on in the world. So sometimes we just don't hear about a lot of these things that are happening on the day to day that we do need to be like more sort of like keyed into. So yes, I'll definitely share those for people to listen into.
You
And
deserve
please,
it.
yeah.
You deserve it.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if you don't think you do, just look at your pay stub every week or 2
Yeah,
weeks,
no
and
kidding.
you definitely
No
those taxes
kidding.
come out. Yeah, no, we definitely owe it to ourselves.
No kidding. No
So,
kidding. Well, I thank you, my friend, for joining me
thank
again.
you.
We'll
This
make
was
this
awesome.
the next top
Yes.
listen to episode. I'll be pushing it a ton, and we'll have a lot more conversations. But thank you for making the time. Always appreciate talking to you about this stuff. And thank you for the work you do and your passion and all you bring to the table. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Love it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right. Well, I just have to say, it feels so good being back. I feel like this sort of chat just went into a great groove. It was always sort of short on time and always so many things that come from it. But I really do hope that I can get this back into rotation and continue to have conversations with this wonderful colleague and many others. But I hope that this conversation and the outcomes from what we discussed really help get your juices flowing. There's definitely ways that we can engage and do things differently in New York City. And I hope that this sort of opens up people's willingness to sort of engage in a different way, to activate in a different way. And I think one of the great sort of like themes that I've heard from this is that we deserve better. And in that, we have to sort of state what it is that we want and what we expect. And so I hope that this uh, encourages people to sort of define that and advocate for it. So I will be sharing a few resources so you can know a bit more about what's happening in the city and how it impacts you. There were a few podcasts that came up in the chat that I had. One is FAQ NYC. I will share the link to that podcast in the show notes. Same thing with Off Topic on Politics and You Decide with Errol Lewis, which are two New York One podcasts. Really encourage you to check those out. There's also a Wikipedia page that is set up to track the 2025 election and the current sort of candidates that have both declared that they're running and some that are rumored to run. So I encourage you to check that out just to know who is sort of like in the playing field and to get to know them and to reach out to them. Many of them are already forming their campaigns. So I encourage you to reach out to them to share your concerns and your hopes so that those are factored into, right, how they craft their messaging, how they craft their vision for the city, and ultimately, hopefully, what they do for us as our new representatives, whoever it may be. So to close, I'd love to hear from you. I know it's been a really long time. If you can, be sure to rate this on your platform of choice. Definitely share it with your network, friends, family, anyone who you think would love to hear the show and engage. And of course, as always, feel free to email me at liz@civilconversationsnyc.com. You can also message me. We have Civil Conversation pages on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I can't wait to hear from you, and I can't wait to deliver you some more helpful, hopefully, conversations.